Hello there and welcome. Today we're going to continue with our trivia game. So in the previous episode we added lives and score to the game, so we now have some kind of goal. We want to reach the highest score, and we can also see it visually on the UI. So if we go to our game scene, we can see everything over here. In this episode we want to change the logic of the questions a bit because we want to make them a bit more efficient. So at this point, if we go to our question archive, we can see that each question has 4 answers, and each answer is simply a string with the answer. Now, we also specify which index is the correct answer, but this is not the most efficient way to do it, especially if we want to randomize the buttons, because if we randomize the buttons, then the index will always change and it won't work this way. That's why we're going to change the code a bit, and this is just a warning. When we do this change, all your different questions are going to be erased, and that's why I also told you not to create a lot of questions. So if you created many questions, just know that it's going to erase them because we're going to change the way the scriptable object is structured. For this, we're going to create a new script and we're going to name it answer. So we're going to create a data class for each answer. So now instead of having strings as answers, we're going to have these classes as answers, and each answer will know if it's the correct answer. And now it doesn't matter if we randomize the order of the buttons, each answer will know if it's the correct one. So for this, we're going to open our answer data class. We're going to remove the mono behavior because it's a data class. We're going to make it system serializable, and we're going to add 2 fields. Public string answer text, this will be the actual answer, but we will also have a public bool which will be is correct, so it's going to check if this is the correct answer. Now in order to create these answers, we also want to have a constructor, public answer, and we're going to set the string text and set the bool correct. And if you see this auto-completion all of the time, this is just something that comes with the newest version of Visual Studio. I did not install anything special. It's simply some kind of auto-suggestion that auto-completes the code for you. It expects the code that you want to do and it offers it. You can press on tab and it simply completes it. So this is the constructor. It will basically take the text and correct answer that we provide and it will set them over here, and now we can save this class. Next, we also want to adjust the question script because we changed the answers, so we're going to open our question script, and inside, instead of having an array of strings, we're going to have an array of answers. And now we also don't need this correct answer index anymore because each answer will know if it's the correct answer. So we don't need this, and we're going to change this method a bit. So instead of getting the index, we're going to get the answer. And then we're going to return if the answer is correct. Right? It's going to take the answer and it's going to check if it's the correct answer by checking this value over here. Now, when we return to Unity, after we save the scripts, we're going to get a bunch of errors, and that's just because we changed the way the answers work. So we need to adjust the rest of the code to work with the new answers. So first of all, we're going to open our question manager. And inside we can see that it doesn't recognize this because this is just an integer. So instead we're going to change this to be an answer object. And we're going to provide it over here to check if it's the correct answer. We're going to save this and we're going to open the UI manager. And over here we can comment out the initialize buttons method because we don't need to do this anymore. So we're going to comment this out. You can hold Control and then press on KC and it will comment this entire thing. Then on answer selected, instead of passing an integer, we're going to pass in the answer and we're going to submit the answer over here instead of an integer. Now you may have noticed that we commented out this part as well, so now the buttons will not react when we click on them, but don't worry, we're going to add this code in a different location in a moment. For now, the next thing we want to do is to shuffle the answers so we don't get the same order on the buttons. We want to shuffle it so it will be a bit randomized. So even if we get the same answer in a different game, it will always be randomized. So now we are going to scroll down to the display question method. And over here, we're going to change things a bit. We're going to shuffle the answers. So we're going to add a line over here. Now we're going to get this error because we need to import the actual package that uses this. So we can hover over this and add, it's a bit hard to see, simply add over here using system link. And this is just a library that allows us to use these kind of sorting operations. What we do here is we take all the answers from within this question and we order it by a random value. We also need to add the package that provides this. So we go over here and we want to use using Unity random. And now it will work. So basically add this thing over here, random Unity engine.random, because this is the library that provides us with this random operation. And now what will happen over here, it will basically take the question, it will take the answer array, and then it will order this array by a random value. And this is not important. You can name it whatever you want, A or answer. It will simply take every member of this array and it will order it by a random value, and then it will make it an array again and it will save it over here. So you can say answer, it doesn't really matter what you put inside. Now over here, instead of checking the length of the answers, we're going to check the length of the shuffled answers. Okay, although it's going to be the same length. And we're going to change the code a bit over here. We're going to leave this part, but we're going to change it a bit. So instead of question answers, we're going to use shuffled answers, and we're going to provide it with the index and answer text, right? Because we want to use the answer text that is inside of this shuffled answered array. Then we're going to remove all the listeners from these buttons. Maybe they have previously assigned listeners. This is just good practice. So answer button, on click, remove all listeners. And then we're going to add the listeners. So over here, we commented this out, but now we want to add this functionality again. We want to make sure that when we click on these buttons, it's going to actually respond and it's going to call this onSelected method so we can submit the answer. So over here, after we remove all the listeners, we are going to have an integer for a local index, captured index. So we basically capture the index and then we set on-click listeners for all of these buttons according to the captured index. Now, if you don't really understand what it simply means that in order to make this to work, we need to make sure that the index stays the same. But the way a lambda works is that it captures the index, and then when we do another loop, it will lose the index. So we cannot just provide it with this index over here. If we provide it with this index over here and we provide it over here, then it's going to lose this index when we run the game. That's why we need to capture the index over here and then make it local and then assign it over here. In this way, it's going to work. And now when we save everything, as I told you, our question archive is going to be deleted. Well, some of it because we changed the structure of our answers. So now we're going to save everything. And of course, we also forgot to remove this. So inside the UI manager, we are going to expand the singleton region and we're going to remove this method because we commented this out. We can also delete this. We don't need this anymore. and we're going to save it again. And now we can click on our question archive and we can see that the questions were not deleted, but the answers were deleted because we changed it to an answer data class. So now we need to add all of them again. So now if we expand each answer, we can see that it has the actual answer text, but it also has a boolean to know if it's the correct answer. So for France, we're going to add London, Berlin, Madrid, and Paris, and then we're going to select is correct on the Paris answer because this is the correct answer. And then inside the code, it will simply check if we clicked on this one, it will know that this is the correct answer and it will apply the correct logic. Now let's do this for the rest of the questions. We can also add a few more questions, and obviously at this part you can add as many questions as you want, and obviously you want a lot of questions for your players to reach higher scores and higher levels. So this one will be something like, which planet is known as the red planet? Again, I just asked ChatGPT to give me a list of questions and answers, and now I'm copying everything inside. And again, if it's a themed trivia, then you can have answers for the theme that you want. And this one is Mars. So let's select this as the correct answer. And let's add another one. And we're going to select William Shakespeare as the correct answer. So now we have a few questions. Obviously, in a real game, you want to have a lot more. So you're going to have to spend some time and add all of these questions. Now, if we save our scene and we go back to the main menu and we run the game, we're going to see that the questions are randomized and also the order of the answers. So right now, this is the question and the Arctic Ocean is at the top. But if we, for example, answer it and then answer it again, and then answer it again, and then let's say Mars. And now you can see that we got the same question, but this time Mars was over here and not over here. So now we can continue. It will basically loop over all our questions endlessly, and it will never end unless we actually lose. So let's say, let's lose. And now you can see that the Atlantic is at the top instead of the Arctic. Let's just lose. And now it's the end of the game. Next, we want to make sure that the same question doesn't appear twice. So basically, it will randomly select a question. It will not select a question that was already answered, okay? But again, it's important to have a lot of questions so the player will never reach the end. If you want your questions to appear again and again, you can simply skip this part, but we don't want this. We want our questions to only appear once. So inside our question class, we're going to add another bool, and we're going to keep track of if this question was answered. Then inside the question manager, we're going to have a method that is going to check if we have more questions available that were not answered. So private bool. Okay, so it will loop over all the questions inside the archive. And if at least one question is not answered, it's going to return true. But if all the questions are answered, it's going to return false. So we're going to know that there are no more questions available. And we want to check this before we load the next question. So we have this method over here, load next question. And before we do this, we're simply going to check this. So if are more questions available is false, then game manager, instance, and game. And we're going to return out of this entire method because we don't want to continue with the questions. We just want to end the game, and it will move to the game over screen. Now we also want to set this is answered bool to be true if we answer the question. So we're going to find the submit method. It was over here. So after we answer this question, and it doesn't matter if it's wrong or correct, we're simply going to set current question is answered to be true. And this way we can keep track of if these questions were answered. Another thing we want to do is to reset all these booleans when we start a new game. Because if you did not know, a scriptable object keeps the values of the different objects even when the game is closed. Okay, so if, for example, I start the game and I answer this question, this will become true. And then when I close the game, it will still keep this value. It will not go back to false. And this is the way scriptable objects work. That's why it's important to reset all of these values to false when we start a new game. So we're going to do this right now when we start a new game. So in the game manager, when we start a new game, we're going to have a method, question manager, instance, reset, questions, data. And we still don't have this method, so let's generate it. We hover, generate method, and we'll generate it inside of the question manager. So let's click on this method, and now we are inside of the question manager, and we're going to add the code for this method. So we basically want to loop over all of our questions inside the scriptable object and set this value to false. Okay, so we basically want to loop over all of these questions, and if they're true, we want to set them back to false, basically reset them. So for each. And now, of course, we need to check if the question was answered once we load it. Okay, so in the question manager, when we scroll up to the load next question method, over here, after we get the random question, we want to make sure that it was not already answered. And so over here, we're going to have a variable previous question, current question, and then we're going to check if current question is answered or previous question is the current question. So we're basically checking two things. If the question that we got over here, the random question, is already answered, we don't want to display it anymore. And if the previous question was exactly like our current question. Okay, so we basically make sure that we don't get the same question and we also don't get an answered question. Now, if the previous question was an answered question, it should probably not display it again, but we just want to make sure. So if this is true, we are going to load a different question. So we're simply going to call this method again. Okay, so we're going to exit by returning, and we're going to load this all over again, and then it's going to get another random question. And of course, if there are no more questions available, it's going to end the game. And now everything should work. So just save all the scripts. And now when we run the game, we're going to see that the same question doesn't appear twice. And if we run out of questions, the game will just end. We can also expand these ones to check if the question was answered. So we can see these bools. So now we have this question, and if we answer it, and it doesn't matter if it's a wrong or correct answer, it's going to make it as answered. So this question is this one. So now I'm going to make a correct guess, and now we can see that it was answered. Now we got another one, correct. Now we got another one, correct. Now all of them are being answered. And when we go over all the questions, the game will simply end. So capital France, Paris. And then when I answer this last one, And now the game ended, although we answered all of them correctly and we did not lose any lives. Ideally, you don't want the player to answer all the questions. You want to have hundreds or even thousands of questions. And of course, you want to make them hard. These are rather simple questions for like a very basic thing that a person should know. But if you have more complicated and difficult questions, then it will be hard, and then the player will struggle to answer all these questions. So that's all for this episode. In the next episode, we want to start implementing the in-game timer, so the player won't be able to just wait endlessly. He will have to answer the questions rather fast. If not, then he will lose his life, and then the question will be marked as answered and he will skip to the next question. So he will have to answer it fast enough, and this will add more challenge to the game. So thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing. It will support me a lot if you like this tutorial. If you like my content, it will also keep you updated when you get more episodes and new content. You can also leave a like for the algorithm. So I'll see you next time.